Spasiba, здравствуйте. That's the Russian I know. Very nice to be here. Thanks for having me. I'm going to be talking about how to build win-win ecosystems between the urban community. So it's not just cities and business, it's also cities, business, and the people of the city. Let's start with a little snippet of where I am now, and I have a very pompous picture to show you. So that's what I'm working for. I'm working for the University of Edinburgh for the Data-Driven Innovation Program, which is part of the Edinburgh City Region deal, a £1.3 billion program, which was signed off in August. So we are just starting it. It's very, very fresh initiative. And I'm in day 55 in the new job today. And I'm not going to be talking about that, just to show you the basics. What we are going to do, and just please do follow us online when we start to develop stuff, is a 10-year, 15-year program of £660 million for data-driven innovation across 5 innovation hubs in the university and 10 industry sectors. So lots of opportunities for collaboration, and I have met interesting people here as well already with whom we hopefully can do good win-win deals on building value out of data. But as said, I'm in day 55 in the job. So previously I've been leading the City of Helsinki Innovation Lab Forum Virium for a decade. And then for the past 3 years, I was the Chief Innovation and Technology Officer in the Future Cities Catapult, and I've been mostly drawing from those experiences, the insights for today. So less about Edinburgh, because you don't know much after 50 days, and more about what I've done in the cities in the past. So that's the dilemma of the smart city. Changing cities is fighting against entropy. That's the nature of it. The city, by default, tries to enter a stage of unorganized chaos every day. And cities are much more like organisms than structures. And I think that is the thing which kind of went wrong in the first wave of smart cities. People thought that cities are machines. You can do an operating system for them, but you can't do an operating system for an organism or a society. You can solve bits and pieces of it. And fighting entropy is kind of in contradiction with the idea of cities being smart. And of course, smart cities is not a new idea. So if we think about it, we have tried to solve a city many times in the past. I have a few examples from just the last 100 years. Le Corbusier developed a site radieux, which was never built, but that was planned for Marseille. City redone, completely new. And the legacy of site radieux is tower blocks. We can then, of course, quarrel whether tower blocks are a good idea or bad, but that's basically what was left of those plans. Frank Lloyd Wright in the USA, he hated Le Corbusier's plan, and he wanted to combine farmlands and the cities. He had the Broadacre, in which everybody had a little farm in the city, and lots of car driving took place. And maybe we could claim that highways are kind of the evolution or degeneration of the Broadacre city. And also less celebrated architects created their dream cities. Germania was supposed to be built in Berlin, where the Berlin is, by Albert Speer. And in good German fashion, they tested it first. So that's actually built. You can find that in Berlin. It's the part of Germania which is there, because Berlin is a swampland, and when they wanted to build these very big buildings, they built this big concrete block first to see what happens. And it started to sink immediately. It keeps on sinking to this day in Berlin. So you can have a look at it. It's not much celebrated part of Berlin architecture, of course. And we could claim that maybe the smart cities first 10 years back plans are not that far away from these utopistic ideas of how to let's redo cities completely. Let's get rid of the cities as they are now and do a different kind of a city. This is Masdar in Abu Dhabi. Not much did come out of that either. That's how it looks like today. So there's one block being built. It's about 15 years behind. It might still happen one day, but at least until today it hasn't happened. And I think it's a good question to ask why that is. Why don't these ideas scale? And I think that's to do with the fact that cities actually are very resilient beings. They are the most enduring creations we built. That picture from Delhi, old Delhi, it's been there for thousands of years. City of Rome is in Rome, Empire of Rome vanished long ago. Cities outlast nation states. They outlast all plans. And basically any city, St. Petersburg here, consists of layers upon layers upon layers of unfinished plans. The ways we thought this city could work, and it was almost there, and then new plans came and replaced them. And that means that city solutions have to be very fault tolerant and able to stand the test of time. And I think that's what went wrong with the Smart Cities 1.0 idea, that we tried to come up with one solution and that's it. That will never be a reality in any city. Of course, it's also great that cities are most enduring human achievements, and undoubtedly they are the success story of humankind in sort of way. That's Shenzhen. It's grown from 80,000 inhabitants to a couple of million in a timeline of 30 years. Urbanization is a success story of humankind. We can, of course, debate whether it's all good, but it's a fact. Cities keep on growing at a very fast pace. And where there's growth, there is opportunity. And I think the opportunity we should be searching for is, okay, we can't completely redo the cities, but maybe we can retrofit them to be more sustainable, ecologically, environmentally, economically, and socially. Because of the legacy of cities, I mean, cities are different ages, thousands of years, hundreds of years, tens of years. Nobody ever thought that cities should be interoperable in any kind of way, which, of course, is a must in the digital age. And therefore, the market of innovative solutions for the urban challenges, as we now have it, is very fragmented. If you do a cool thing from St. Petersburg, it taps into St. Petersburg city systems. It most probably don't work in a neighboring city, unless you build a standalone platform. I'll come back to that later. But if you want to tap into the existing city systems, you need to always customize the solutions. And that has been kind of a story of urban solutions and things which cities have bought. They develop solutions for small user groups of one city, and one city is on the market. Therefore, they are expensive and they tend to be buggy and not working very well. And how to get past that? We have some commercial solutions. We actually are kind of doing it. Who doesn't have a mobile phone there? I see exactly 0 hands. So we all have tools with which we now use the city, and it changes the way we do urbanism, changes the way we spend our urban life. The picture there is from Helsinki. It's an event called the Restaurant Day. Restaurant Day is a simple idea in which anybody can open a restaurant during one day. It was originally sort of a civil disobedience idea, because it's very difficult to open restaurants in Helsinki, so people who wanted to do it decided, let's open 50 of them, so police can't get to all of us in the same time. And it became a sort of accepted event in a city. And there are hundreds of pop-up restaurants twice a year in the restaurant day. And it looks analog, people are doing food and other people are eating it, but actually it's digital innovation because you can't find the places unless you have the app. And that's the way we use the city nowadays. We find, we search, and use a digital interface to us. And it's changing the way cities work. WeWork is the world's largest chain of co-working spaces. They raised £4 billion of venture capital last summer, and it very quickly became the biggest leaser of space in London and expanding across the world. And if you are part of WeWork, you get the same work experience wherever you travel. You go to a WeWork hub and it's yours. And the transport app, City Mapper, another example from London, well, it's a basic mobility app. It gives you a route from point A to point B, like all of them do. But it's going from the digital domain to the physical domain because they have launched smart ride transport. They are using existing black cabs and shuttle buses to fill the gaps of the urban transport with their own service. Because they know where people want to go. Better than the London Transport does. Because the platform collects the information for them. Yet these are kind of narrow solutions in a certain vertical domain. And I think when we want to have sort of city-wide platforms, the options we currently have are not necessarily things we would wholeheartedly welcome to all global cities. Because the two main trends in wider platforms to run cities are either state-run, that's the Shenzhen City Operations Center by Huawei, and that's the state surveillance city. I've been there, it's frightening. You see there's a face in the middle of a picture there, and they showed a demo in which they started to follow a random person in the traffic lights through facial recognition. And they were very proud of the tech. It was impressive, but it's of course very spooky that you would live in a city where you could be surveilled anytime through technology. But of course we can debate whether the other solution is any better because that's to let Google run our cities. And of course motivations are different. They don't want to control you as a state, but they do want to control you as a company. And I think it's maybe just a nuanced difference whether controlled by a trade or doing business is better or worse than to be controlled by a company. You're still controlled and checked by somebody. Google Sidewalk Labs is running the controversial project in Toronto at the moment, in which they are launching a smart city, and they are saying that nobody owns the data, but the fact is that they do. Google does own the data. And the question I want to study today with you is that, is there a third option? Can we do a win-win deal on our cities which wouldn't be run as a monopoly by any single player, whether it's a company or the state? Could it be an ecosystem which is interoperable, in which small companies have a chance, in which people can do services and run services and ideate and develop the city? I would welcome that. Main reason for that is I'm an architect originally. I believe that place-based decisions should be made where the place is, and that means in the city by the people of the city. The quote was from the Jamie Lerner, who turned the city of Curitiba into quite a good city back in his days of being a mayor. So, how can we create sort of two lines of communication? First, a fair deal between the demand and the supply, so that we would have informed partners to work with the companies, meaning us as individuals, and cities as organizations to be more informed buyers and informed clients, which can negotiate, and then between the top-down and bottom-up ways to manage the city. This is something in which most cities still fail. City governments have used to run their business as, from an ivory tower, but the fact is that no matter how clever people you have in the city hall, most clever people in the city, in any city, don't work for the city. It's just a game of numbers. Urban community, the collective intelligence of the people of the city always outbeats any city government, and it's possible to tap into that potential as your co-workers, as your creators and urban problem solvers. And I'll study a few ways to do that, but first a couple of challenges which need to be solved when we retrofit cities. Because that's what we need to do. Most cities of the world already exist, and when we want to make them smart, we need to retrofit them. We need to upgrade them to accommodate digital disruption and new ways of managing the city. Which will be tough because digitalization never can create any benefits if you just trust in the technology. You need to also change the process. You need to change the way services are developed and delivered. And that means letting things go and starting new things and change. The older the organization, the more difficult the change is. So that's why cities face three kinds of challenges. Number one, it's a challenge of legacy. New York has 60,000 yellow cabs. If you would need to do an urban system for a city nowadays, you probably wouldn't do it by letting 60,000 cabs on the street without any ways to see where they are or actually call them in advance, because they keep on riding around the city. It's forbidden to pre-order a cab in New York, or used to be forbidden. And then Uber comes and in a couple of years disrupts that, and cab drivers are furious, and they are furious for a good reason, because their legacy system was messed up very quickly. An average city runs also hundreds of IT systems, and the same thing there. You need to upgrade that legacy to be interoperable, and it's messy. Second challenge is the challenge of speed. I already mentioned the way digital disruption comes to our cities in form of the platform companies. Airbnb, of course, everybody knows it. Didn't exist 10 years back. Now it's the biggest chain of accommodation available in the world, owning 0 apartments, but yet that's how it is. And it's messing up the rental apartment market, and it's messing up the hotel market in many places. And the third, which is kind of linked to the first two, is the challenge of readiness. How can the cities manage digital disruption? Do they have the competence? Those pictures were from our process in the city of Belfast, where we work with them to develop the smart city framework, which is intended to sort of upgrade the competence of the city hall to manage digital disruption. And most cities don't think it's their job. They don't think they should have. They do urban planning. Every city in the world does urban planning. It's a core task. But at the moment, most cities don't understand that doing digital is also a core task. They can't outsource it to companies. They need to have competence in-house. So I'll go through 5 ways to tackle those challenges in which we are going to step now and go to practical examples, and they all deal with an idea of urban experimentation. Because there are slow ways and quick ways to develop things. Traditionally, cities have developed through policy making and regulation, and it has its place. But what I am claiming is that policy making and regulation should be done through testing, experimenting, and trying things out quickly. And then you go into policy. Because that's the way urban services are developed by companies, and if cities don't do it, they will always be behind. permanently be behind of where the market is. And that's not where you want to be if you want to run your city in a proactive way. So how can we do urban experimentation in an agile manner which gives us tools to then do regulation and deals, because both are needed. Regulation is needed and deals with companies are needed. Number one, openness as a competitive advantage. I don't know how big open data is in Russia. Probably quite a few cities have open data portals. The cities are sharing the public data they create with developers. Frankly, my take on open data is not ideological at all. I don't believe in, I'm not sort of an advocate of openness because it's good as like right, as politically okay or important. I like openness because it's pragmatic, it's quick, it's the quickest way to get stuff done. As an example, that's the from London Data Store holds lots of open data, and that's work we did in the Futurities Catapult with London to create a kind of a prediction engine for London. It's a gamified interface, but there's also the business intelligence interface for the city of that. And basically what it does is that it gives you the chance to be a mayor by asking a series of questions, or then you can design your own questions. And then the data scientists of the Catapult created, together with urbanists, predictions about if you, for example, decide 56% of cycles and 44% of electric bus for the city, what does that demand from the city infrastructure? What changes you will need to do to enable that solution? An area in which there's been extensive work done by the Catapult is planning. It's a large program called Future of Planning, which deals with the question of how to digitalize urban planning and create a planning process which responds to the needs of speed in the city. And many people say that planning is broken, so there's lots of demonstrations around the global cities about bad ideas for planning, but our take on the topic was that planning is not broken, it just needs an update. And why that is that planning is digitalized at the moment. There's construction. There's right between hospitality sector and agriculture and hunting when it comes to using digital systems in planning. Even though plans are being done in CAD systems, the actual planning system is very analog. It uses hard-to-read PDF files which are oddly named, which can't be combined with any other PDF files, and everything takes forever. An average plan for a city, when you do a master plan, can take 10 years to develop. And in the years it takes to do that, the world changes. Here's the timeline of the past 14 years. And there you can see London Master Plan. London Plan 2004, 2008, 11, and 15. And between each of these plans, a couple of presidents have changed. Airbnb has come and messed up your hotel market. And at the moment, Sadiq Khan in London has to implement Boris Johnson's plans, because Sadiq Khan's plans will be ready about the time he leaves the office. There must be a better way to do this, which we are studying. Also, this is how you know that there's going to be a 30-story tower in your home street. It's a planning notice in the light post there. No wonder people are not happy with the system. So, the planning system looks like that. It's a well-designed system, but what's interesting about the planning system is that when you start to analyze it, it consists of series of yes-no decisions. And if you are a coder, you know that yes, no decisions equals digital. Zeros and ones. And most of the steps there can be sped up seriously by implementing digital platform with which you can do it. And what is currently being done, a few pilot projects, is to have a data-driven, digitally enabled planning system in which you can drop your plan and get an almost immediate reply of whether it, for example, is allowable according to the current planning rules. Concrete case from that, there's lots of attic expansion going on in London, and with the borough of Hackney, the Catapult has designed sort of a test your expansion engine. You develop your construction plans in digital format, you drop them in the system, and you get a reply whether this kind of attic expansion would be okay or not. You don't have to submit the plan to the city and wait for 3 weeks. You get the reply almost immediately. And then you fix the things and you resubmit until it starts to work. In the larger scale of pictures, we want to harmonize the way this information works across the UK and across the globe. And here's a prototype of the land portal, which kind of takes the same idea which I showed you with the London data store pilot, transforms that in the urban domain. So how that works, it taps into existing data about transport routes, electricity, water, sewage, land availability, where the schools are, etc. And then you can drop, as an urban planner, planned projects to plots of land on the map. And you get immediate heat maps about what kind of pinch points might this kind of a plan create in the city at large, where there's land available. If we build 20,000 homes here, what kind of restrictions might there be in electricity network or transport systems? All that data is there already. All that data is already used for planning, but it has taken weeks to do these evaluations. Now you can do them in real time. You can play around and you see whether plans will work or whether they will cause problems. All available existing data. Actually nothing that innovative about it, except that it's available in one single service, which constructors can be using, or people building houses can use, or urban planners can use. So that was open by default. How does it speed up things? Second is, I already mentioned, that most clever people in the city, and any city, don't happen to work for the city council, just because of the size of the populations in any city. That means that there's lots of capacity out there with which the city can work. And that requires then interaction with those developers. Because some of the people of the city are lead users who are, for example, very good at developing digital solutions. There's a famous case from Mexico where the government was going to buy a decision-making app for the parliament from a US company, which I won't name here because that would be rude, but the price tag was $1 million, and then the hacker community of Mexico organized a competition. Hey, $10,000 for the one who built this fastest. And it took 5 days. And there was an app which could do the same as the $1 million solution which the government was going to buy. The nice story about that is that it went public, created a scandal, and then Jorge Soto, who was the guy who ran the hacker competition, got an invite to the parliament. And he was like, oh bloody hell, am I going to be shot? He went there, instead he got a job. So they hired him as an in-house digital developer for the government of Mexico, and they did actually develop the $10,000 app, which to my knowledge works this day. So developers can know quick ways to do things well. That's a picture from Helsinki, where Helsinki is running a program called Helsinki Loves Developers. That is from a Slush Ultra Hack event a couple of years back, where the hacker community of the Slush event joined the city and tried to develop solutions for urban challenges. Few companies were created in that event. Example from a later portfolio of the Catapult is Future Belfast. I mentioned that we did a smart city framework for City of Belfast. Well, if you know Belfast, you also know that if you can get Belfast to collaborate, you can get anybody. It's a rough place. I mean, civil war is still present in the city. Dynamite is in the basement, so to say, waiting if there's good need to be use that, and hopefully Brexit won't be a good need. Anyway, they are also, because of the situation, they are very good at listening to everybody. So it's a nice city to work with, because the politicians are quite aware that you have to listen to the community. And that's what we did when we developed the Smart City framework. So we combined innovative design methods, collaborative working with data and technology, and then matched that with the existing city strategy, so that you'd had the kind of link between co-creation and regulation. In practice, it was lots of hands-on work, because one thing we've seen is that working together always beats any strategy process. If you work on pragmatic things, you can bypass many issues which people otherwise might have in collaborating with each other, because they get excited, and when people are excited, they find solutions. It's as simple as that. So in Belfast, what we developed was a smart city framework which consisted of kind of two layers of stuff. There was the framework, which they have since developed into ongoing program, but there was also concrete projects which were designed to prove that the framework will work. So concrete pilots, which we did at the same time as we did the bigger strategy, in order to get the buy-in from the urban community. And a particular case in there was the rates forecasting. I have to tell a bit of a short story about what that all means. In the UK, the city gets lots of its money from property taxes. They are called rates because they don't want to use the word tax, but it's tax anyway. And Belfast brought home 74% of potential tax. So that meant millions of lost income every year, because they didn't know where the companies are. And companies didn't voluntarily come and say, hey, we are happy to pay tax here, so here's my money. And the people whose job it was to collect taxes said that, you know, we can't go to 50,000 doors to knock doors. It's not possible. We don't have that many people, so we just lose the income. And what we then did was to organize a competition for data analysts of whether it would be possible to see and predict where the companies are. How it worked was that there was a challenge. Hey, we don't collect enough taxes from the property. There was an open competition in which companies proposed solutions for that challenge. They got a little money to do a proof of concept. I think it was £20,000 or something per company. 2 free companies were selected to do prototypes for that, and they were then tested in real life scenario. After which, best ones got the deal. It's basically a challenge competition, which is a procurement. City is buying innovation from companies through a procurement process. Here's the winner, Inquiring Minds data analytics company, service called Live Property Red List. It brought home in 2-week period in the pilot phase £400,000 of new income in 2 weeks, and the whole pilot, the whole program cost £110,000 to run. So it paid itself back in 2 weeks over 3 times. Which was pretty unique. So the Department of Economy said, project paying for itself in the research and development phase, that basically never happens. And that then led to a systemic way of working where the city currently is running 27 challenges in different domains in Belfast, which are available for companies, big and small, for innovators and developers. Number 3, well, I already said this in a way. Don't assume, test. Because it's possible to test things nowadays. So urban living labs are the way to test things. This particular pilot is from Southampton. It's a tech totem. Basically, it's a parklet, so it's the size of one parking space in the city, which has been turned into a little mini park, and there's a solar-powered measuring station as part of the system, which is both a billboard and an air quality sensor, or actually any sensor, because it's very easy to swap elements in the tech totem. The city can decide whether they want to measure noise, air pollution, or, funny enough, bats. They are being used in Cambridge currently to measure what kind of bats there are living in the city, because that gives you a good indication of ecodiversity, I've been told. The idea of the tech totems is that they will form a federated fleet of totems. They can be purchased and run by different organizations. This is the city of Southampton. In Cambridge is the university. But the data layer is shared. So the more totems there are by different organizations, the more data they provide, and everybody benefits. So we sort of expect that there would be sort of a new way to embed measuring and sensors in the city. We have also done speculative design. That's a bike prototype, which was designed to replace mobile phone when you cycle. It's from London. Well, watching your mobile phone when you cycle isn't very safe. Yet many people do it because they are watching the map. And it's about as dangerous or more dangerous than doing the same thing while you drive. This prototype replaces it with just an arrow. It taps into GPS and it shows you where to go. And that is now a product called Beeline. You can buy it if you want a safe way to travel. But when you start to go deeper in kind of a user engagement, you might bump into the question that users are not the same. And they have different incentives and different motivations. And when you want to really dive into needs of the users in areas such as healthcare or education, people come in different shapes and sizes. There are lead users who are very good in particular domain, there are people who are involved, and there are people who don't give a shit. And basically we should be able to listen to everybody. And I share with you an interesting equation which is from Anthea Watson-Strong of Google, who has actually ripped it off from two researchers from the 60s, William Riker and Peter Odeshok. And these cryptic letters represent people's probability to vote. And it's a good equation that works nowadays, so I'll share with you because it gives you sort of a tool to think about whether people are willing to participate. Because cities always overestimate how eager people are. So how it works is that P is the probability. If I participate, will anything happen? Do I trust that somebody will do something if I put my energy as a user in this thing? And B is benefit, which is what's in it for me. As a person, if I join this, what do I get? And if either of these is zero, the sum is, or the equation is zero. So if there's no probability that anybody will do anything, people don't join. or if there's no personal benefit whatsoever, people don't join either. And the bigger the sum is, the better the outcome. So that equation is important there. Then there's D, which is a sense of duty, and that's the thing which cities always overshoot. They think people really care and want to really join, and most people don't. Yet it's part of the equation, but it's not a major thing. And the left side of the equation needs to be bigger than the right side, which is the cost. And the cost, when it comes to participation, is a cost of effort, cost of time, cost of not doing something else when I do this. And of course, you can play with the cost as well. The easier it is to join, easier it is to participate, the smaller the cost. You can have lightweight interaction, and that's a cheaper cost, and more people are willing to join. What Anthea Watson-Strong says that there's a new element in that, and that is N, which is kind of related to the D, and that's a network effect. If your peers are doing it, you might want to do it. And that's a big thing in, for example, open source communities, which largely work on a reputation basis. You are being recognized by your peers by being a good coder, by being a good developer, by contributing to this. And there are more opportunities to use the N than there used to be in the analog days. And I think if cities kept this in mind, they could get much better results from participation than they currently do. There has to be a promise, there has to be a benefit, or like a promise that, hey, you join in and we will do something, whichever the something is. There has to be a benefit for the very users who join. If you want kindergarten teachers to join, what is it for the kindergarten teachers? If you want school kids to join, what do they get? Which is probably not money, it's something else, better services, being heard. There's some sense of duty, but there can be networking. So you get to know your peers, you want to work with them, you like the people, you don't want to let them down. And you can drop the cost, make it easy to join, easy to participate. Concrete examples from Helsinki, Smart Kalasatama, which is a fish harbor. Kalasatama, just like Japanese a bit. Means that smart fish harbor, it's a smart city region of Helsinki, in which there's a certain base level of smartness, which is done by regulation. All your usual elements you would expect: smart grid, electric vehicles, renewable energy, etc. But then there's a strong citizen interaction and collaboration layer in Smart Kalasatama. And they call it a program of quick experiments. Ongoing thing to try things out fast in the area. And how it works is basically the same method which I described regarding in Belfast. They tease out challenges from the city and from the companies. They open them as open thematic competitions for companies and innovators, and then they give the opportunity to pilot it, develop it with some money, and then pilot it in the city. And most companies really value the chance to get the permission to do things in the city space. So there's lots of interest to this, hundreds of applicants for the calls every time they are organized. And dozens of pilots have been run. And then the citizens join in the evaluation process. So they are working with design methods, design tools like models, together with service designers, and they are being recognized in different user roles. Because, as said, users come in different section sizes. There are users who are sort of innovators, lead users. They are experts in a certain domain. It's, for example, in sports, nobody would think about developing skis without skiers. Of course you need to have the sports people involved, yet we do design urban services without the communities participating. There be co-creators representing certain user groups. I already mentioned school teachers, whoever they are, disabled people of the city. people of color, school kids, whoever you kind of want to evolve. They can contribute to other people's ideas. You share the ideas, and other people can feed in that, hey, if you did that, it would be even better. So we share the ideas openly. And then they can be testers. They can try things out. They can be part of the quick experiment. They can be informed that, hey, this kind of thing is now available, and tell about it to your friends so that you get better visibility. So different layers of joining in. And it works so well that the Helsinki has published it as a cookbook, and it's now being implemented as part of the 6-city strategy in the 6 largest cities of Finland as well. So it's been sort of spreading across the Finnish cities as we speak. Okay, we are starting to creep close to the end. 2 things left. And number 4 is the fact that one city is not a market, and now I'm going a bit geeky because I'm going to be talking about standards. I love standards. Standards are great. Standards are sexy. And that's because standards build markets which are interoperable and which things can roam from city to city. The government digital services in the UK call it fixing the plumbing. You know, you have to fix the plumbing in order to make the water flow. You have to make the cities interoperable by joint plumbing. And the challenge for most cities when they try to think about standards is that the needs of the cities don't look like standards. You have reliable energy or clean air, transport systems, healthy citizens, economic prosperity. And what standards give you is technology standards or management standards or IoT standards or data standards. Yet there's a link between the two if you combine them through experimentation. And the way we believe fixing the plumbing works best is that you don't try to build deep integration, which is one of the things which I think IBM dreamt of about 10 years back in the first smart city thing. You know, everything works in this one urban operating system. Instead, we think that you should have minimum level of interoperability, so loose compatibility of systems. You combine systems of St. Petersburg and Moscow on the minimum level, as lightly as possible. Because that's fast, that's economical, that's safe. Instead of building any single operating system for a country, you build touch points, minimum interoperability points, minimum touch points between different services. What do you need to connect in order for the interoperability to work? And you don't connect anything else, only the minimum. That's the internet way of doing things. I mean, that's the IP protocol kind of way of doing things, which is different thinking from the classical IT system thinking. Project in which it currently happens is a European thing called Synchronicity. It's a big monster of a project, about 18 million euros, I think, which builds minimum interoperability mechanisms between cities and then tests them out in practice by organizing challenge competitions, once again, challenge competitions for companies to develop services and develop these mechanisms further. The idea is to find urban solutions which create better life for the people of the city. So it has a sort of a quite high targets while building these mechanisms. And why cities in the first place, as the way to do that sort of interoperability development of the society, is that we, as Francesca Bria said yesterday, cities are better at this than governments are. Cities need to do things in practice. They are collaborating, they are doing things for real when the government starts thinking about it. Cities are leading in climate change, fighting climate change. They are doing more than national governments. And that will keep on growing, because cities are the only part of governance which will grow, because our cities are growing. So they are transformative power. So here are examples of the interoperative mechanisms. They are basically points of connections between two services, which can be, for example, API. I mean, do you know, guys, know what an API is? Who doesn't? Okay. It's an application and protocol interface. That means that it's the way to access a digital service. Apple provides an API for the developers who develop apps. If they follow Apple API, that service will be running on an iPhone. City can do the same. They can open an API for a service. And that's what you are using if you are, for example, using transport apps in any city. That transport app connects to the transport data API of the city, which gives the transport data to the service. So what we are searching for here is APIs for data storage, for the marketplace, and for data models. Because if you don't have the data in a similar model, it won't work between two cities. It's ongoing. There has been an open call. I don't think you can join anymore. Sorry about that. I think it closed, at least the first phase, but there's 2 more coming. There's 8 European cities involved who are running these pilots, and it still will keep on going for 2 more years. So follow that space. There's quite sizable amount of piloting money available, 3 million euros through the open call. Trying to build a global IoT market which is interoperable between cities. I will close with the funny number 6 and number 5, if I count it right. I jumped 1, which is the question of privacy. You know, that's the elephant in the room when it comes for digitalization. After data breaches and after all these kind of negative discussion about how we treat private data, people don't trust digital service providers at the moment. That's where we are. But maybe we could also see privacy and doing privacy right as an opportunity. And that's the pitch I'm going to close with. I'm involved, and the University of Edinburgh is involved in a thing called My Data Movement. And that movement aims to build a new take on how to manage identity. So what we want to do is to provide a sovereign identity which is not tied into any single service provider, which is at the control of the users, but which you can use across all service providers. The current situation looks like that. So you all are experiencing that. You are using your services, and you have umpteen million passwords, and you have umpteen million identities across different users, and nobody ever reads the terms. You always click the button, I have read the terms, I have accepted this, and you give away your rights to your data through million user contracts, or maybe not a million, but I think my password register at the moment is 470 something. So 470 deals of my data with random service providers, and I haven't read the terms. I bet if anybody has. Who reads all the terms before you sign, before you use the app? Nobody. I see laughter in the room. You do! That is good. So, what if instead of that, we could create a model which is not a mess, and is not any single organization which owns your data. I mean, that's what Apple and Google and Amazon want to do. They want to actually be the providers. Amazon is going to healthcare as we speak. They want to be the one. You are part of Amazon. You are their asset. Then there's GDPR, the European Privacy Regulation, which is kind of a law-driven way to manage privacy, but that's very blunt. I mean, law is not a tool. It's not a very handy way to do anything. What if instead of that, there would be tools to manage my data? That's the idea of my data movement. And basically how it works is that me, as an individual, data is detached from identity. Somebody can hold my data, but they actually can't do anything with it unless my identity gives an okay. And identity can be managed elsewhere and will be managed by me. Idea of my data is that I'm the user. I can have my data operator. I mean, it could be Google if I want to give it to them, but it could be, hopefully, some less corporate stakeholder. And then I'll provide the identity to different data holders. They hold my data, they not own it. I own my data. And the ways to manage my data might be radically different depending on which service provider I work with. And I can decide to transfer my data from provider A to provider B, and it works just the same. We believe that this is the way private data should be managed. This is the way we should manage identity. We hold the keys to our identity, which is sovereign and which we will then provide to different parties who give us then services on their platforms. The global NGO has just been created, so I invite all you to join My Data Global. A couple of weeks back in Barcelona was the founding meeting, and it has partners in about 100 countries already, so it's going to be a big thing. I'm not sure if there's a Russian node. I should have checked, but I didn't. Apologies for that, but I'd be damned if there isn't. There's probably a Russian node in my data somewhere. Check it, because we have the possibility to get this right. Because I don't think we want to take either the Chinese model, where my identity is owned by the government, nor the US model, where my identity is owned by the corporations. I think we should own our identity and then use it actively across the whole digital domain in which we work. So that comes to the conclusion. Just as a quick recap, how to do smart cities for people. First, let's understand that openness is a competitive advantage. It makes sense to do open source, open data, because it's pragmatic, it builds interoperability faster, it gives opportunities for more stakeholders than closed systems. Second, most clever people of the city don't work in any single organization or the city hall, so tap into them. Use the urban community as your developers, as your co-creators. Third, don't assume and overplan, instead test. Try things out, be agile, do minimum viable products, and test those with the people. Co-create them with the people, test those with the people in urban living labs. Fourth, remember that no matter how big your city is, it's still not the market. In the digital domain, markets are bigger. So the best benefit we can get from the digital domain is that if we can build solutions which use similar components across multiple cities, because then the cost of developing any single of them is shared between lots of stakeholders. And you can have different ways to do it. You can build city networks which are national, you can build city networks which are international, but build those networks. Don't think that you need to solve it all alone in your city. And lastly, let's take care of our data. You know, it's our valuable asset. So let's not give it away cheap. Thank you.
Thank you, Jarmo. It was amazing. We have about 10 or 15 minutes for the Q&A session. У нас есть 10 минут на вопросы. Задавайте вопрос на русском языке. После серии вопросов мы начнем сразу следующую лекцию. Да, мы готовы. Вот.
Ярмо, спасибо за блестящее выступление. Можно последний слайд, ну или 5 пунктов, о которых вы говорили? Представьте, я крупнейший девелопер, застройщик в городе. Как я каждый из этих пунктов могу использовать? Не мэрия, не общественная организация. Я девелопер. Я строю 1000 квадратных метров на гектарах привычным образом. И вдруг каждые 5 пунктов. Спасибо.
I think the property sector is weird because I think property sector actually have almost the same opportunities as the city can have. You are building the city, and when you are building new places, then you don't have the problem of legacy to the extent which you have if you are retrofitting the city. And I think there are examples of where living labs are being used in developing new properties, and actually in the Kalasatama, the smart Kalasatama area, property developers are part of that network. They have joined in the quick experiments. They own some of the experiments. They actually co-developed with the property developers. So how that would work in practice, probably just starting to join forces with other developers to come up with the digital standards for planning and for building. That's the interoperability part. And then you can launch pilots which, for example, take place in temporary constructions within your area, which is a thing which actually was done in Kalasatama. So we used container parks to test services in the region before they were implemented.
Вот вопрос рядом с вами.
Спасибо за замечательную презентацию. У меня вопрос такой. Вот все, что вы сегодня описали, понятно, что оно зависит от сильной политической воли муниципалитета, мэра. Но в условиях, когда этой политической воли нету, отсутствия понимания важности инновационных подходов, как вы думаете, возможно ли разработать City Dashboard, о котором вы упомянули, как инструмент для гражданского мониторинга и как первый шаг в развитии Smart City? И, соответственно, если нету политической воли, то тогда можно ли разработать и создать City Dashboard с минимальным количеством данных, которые генерирует муниципалитет? То есть вопрос, можно ли создать City Dashboard, который в большей степени будет разработан на основе crowdsourced data, corporate data и так далее. Спасибо.
Can you develop a dashboard when there's little or no data? Actually, that's a thing which is happening and has happened in different cities. This is a corporate example, a company example, that in Istanbul, in Turkey, City Mapper, which is the transport app I showed, they couldn't access public transportation data. But what they did was to open an interface for people to feed in where buses, bus information or transport information in their platform. So basically they used the 19 million people of Istanbul to populate their app with the data which the city wouldn't share with them. And of course, halfway through the process, the city noticed what's happening and they joined in because they were starting to make themselves slightly ridiculous. So there are ways around that. Frankly, I don't know whether the data is alive at the moment, though. But that was the pretty good attempt to change it anyway. I think OpenStreetMaps is a good example of how you can create very high quality services in a purely crowdsourced manner. OpenStreetMaps in many cities is the best map, better than any official map, because the cumulative hour of users in a big city, it's just much bigger than a mapping company can invest in such a service. And I think there are examples in, for example, where decision-making data has been manually fed into the to city dashboards. Then about how to get the buy-in, because I think that would be a good sort of additional question to that. If the mayor is not interested or doesn't understand, what I think does work is an approach where developers just develop a very well-functioning service for a particular urban challenge and then try to get it used by people. Because often city governments do get it when they see good examples, when they see that something does work in their city better than it used to be before. So sort of power of positive example can be a way to create a buy-in from the top.
Вопрос вот на первом ряду. Подождите, пожалуйста.
Wait a second, I need to get the translation.
I can speak in English. Thank you very much for your very interesting presentation. It's very good. And I want to ask some question. Okay, I want to speak in English. Which engineering solutions do you think are more interesting in here in St. Petersburg? We have many interesting solution engineering system. For me, very interesting. For your opinion, what more interesting here?
Sorry, can you give it again? Because I was actually listening to this and you missed your first half of the question because I thought you were switching languages. Sorry about it. Can you say it again?
What interesting, which interesting solution do you have? Do we have here, for your opinion?
I haven't checked the St. Petersburg scene very well, to be frank, but I think Moscow is doing pretty good work in, I would say, around the kind of some of the more infrastructure-driven aspects of smartness. So maybe less so on the people domain, but when it comes for grids and some parts of the transport, I think there's been some good thinking, even though I have to say that the idea that you could solve traffic problems by building wider roads, it's not really a good idea, but it's been proven to fail everywhere else, and I think it will prove to fail in Moscow, but maybe I'll skip further criticism here.
Okay.
Последний вопрос.
Thank you.
Вот молодой человек.
Спасибо, очень интересная презентация. Скажите, мы говорили об идентичности, и часто, когда, обычно вообще, когда идентичность оказывается в руках человека, он начинает себя как-то выражать, что-то создавать. Скажите, это как-то, вот ваше приложение, ваши планы, они как-то смогут принести пользу креативным индустриям? Спасибо.
Oh, that's a good one. I most definitely think they can. And I think the sovereign identity would be one of the ways to solve the kind of income problem of the digital copyright. Because if you could combine your sovereign identity and tag it into your creative work, you could then map the use of that work across the digital domain, and you could provide sort of a different access to that depending on how you work. And I think there's a good example of that by an artist called Imogen Heap. Imogen Heap from the UK, who has she's developing a platform called Creative Passport. And Creative Passport actually is a sovereign identity for artists, which is connected to the work. So it's worth checking.
Thank you so much, Jarmo.